So technology or chips? Oh, all right. I'd like to call to order the October 8th, 2013 regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Sandy, you would call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belleville. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'd like to remind our audience tonight that the new vision of the Boulder Valley School District is we develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which when fulfilled will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the great challenges of their time. In support of that vision, I'd like to have the superintendent's report first. Dr. Messenger.
President Reed and members of the board, welcome. Well, first off, I'd like to just acknowledge that an annual event in the Ed Center is that we host an art show, and so our artwork in our boardroom, our conference room, my office get refreshed annually with our student artists. And so earlier this evening, we hosted a gathering of parents and students and art educators to enjoy what you get to enjoy every 2 weeks when you meet in this room. So again, I always struggle with saying goodbye to the artwork that I really enjoy, but it's always nice to have it refreshed. And so if you haven't been in my office lately, please drop by and check out the artwork there as well. So a few items I'd like to report on this evening. I'd start with a topic that we've been visiting about some on a regular basis, and that's the impact of the flood on the school district. So I just want to give a few updates and then be glad to answer questions about this issue. So we reopened Crestview Elementary School on Monday, September 30th, and that was a huge effort among many, including the Crestview staff under Ned Levine's leadership, our maintenance, under Mike Caskelli's leadership. Mike is here this evening representing maintenance and operations, and so our IT department, really dozens and dozens of our own staff. ServPro was our contractor on restoration, and they subcontracted a lot of work. So some of you were at the campus, some of you drove by and observed a really active center for 2 weeks, getting that building back. So carpet's going in now. I believe this week the carpet in the building will be complete, so they're working away through the projects, the finished work and things. Probably our most long-standing, outstanding project will be the kitchen area. We are still able to serve hot lunch there with the help of our neighboring schools. So we're a little tight in the lunchroom, but it's working well. But we're having to really rebuild the whole kitchen because of moisture that got behind the walls and behind the fixtures. So a big project there, but we've made good progress. You probably know from the media that Highway 119 opened up the canyon on Sunday evening, which was a huge benefit to our students and staff to commute between Nederland and Boulder. We had been pretty creative in getting people back and forth the 2 weeks prior to that. Last week, the CDOT Colorado Department of Transportation allowed us to take a bus run in the morning and the afternoon with patrol escorts so that we could start that service, but obviously it's a lot easier now that the highway's open. So my thanks to all the agencies that worked with us on that as well. Regarding mountain schools, that's probably where still one of our greatest challenges is working with our students who reside in the mountains just because of access, because a lot of roads are still impacted. But Gold Hill, visited it a couple times in the last 2 weeks. They're up and running and doing fine. Nederland Elementary, Middle, Senior are doing fine. We had some trouble with internet connectivity because our fiber broke in the canyon, but we were able to get our contractors up and have it repaired. It went on longer than we'd like, having it not work well, but it is working fine now. So the other community in the mountains that we're continuing to work with is Jamestown. I think you know we have some of the students from Jamestown with one of their teachers attending at Community Montessori. And then the other group of Jamestown students are attending in a temporary school setting in a home in the area west of Jamestown, Barkay area. That's a subdivision in there, and Gracious Family hosting. Teacher there, support staff there. Sandy Rippler and I went and visited the site last week and checked on the students. We're looking for a longer-lasting temporary home in the area. Our plan to meet with parents next Monday to visit with them about what options we have. We've also been in conversation with Boulder County Sheriff and Safety there, as well as fire and emergency services in the area, as well as the mayor of Jamestown. We're just not ready to move back into the school. Our school actually is in really good condition, lacking water, but other than that, it's in really good condition. But access to the school is really problematic as far as roads, and then just basic infrastructure in the community. There's worry about health and safety. Even if we were able to physically get the children there, is that the right setting for them? So we'll continue to work with the community, and when we can, we'll move back, and obviously that's a lot of issues we don't have control over, so we'll work with those agencies. But again, they've been great to work with, and we appreciate that. The other big project, if you've been by Boulder High lately, you know that the fields between the building and the creek were, all but destroyed, basically, really impacted. And so the estimate is we're somewhere around $750,000 to $1 million to replace that turf and bring it back to its condition. So that was a big impact. So if you've been by there, and that really was flood water that came up from the creek. Some of it made it clear to the building, but a lot of the impact at Boulder High's campus was on the athletic fields and the complex around that. So that's a big deal. The other thing I'd mention is that we have multiple contractors doing roof repair on our buildings because of just the amount of rain and all that comes with that. Any stress that a roof was experiencing before that, it just compounded that. So we, as you know, had some water damage just from roof leakage, but also our concern is about the conditions of the roof as we go into winter and could potentially have snow on those roofs through the winter. So the other is we have some gym floor damage at Boulder High and some of our other schools from water that either got directly on the floors or got underneath the floors. So some of that can be managed through dehumidification and treatment, and some treatment on the floor surface after that gets dried out. And then in some cases, we will have to replace at least one gym floor that was impacted by the flood water. So that's, every building was sort of touched by this. The other thing that I would just mention is that anywhere we had flood water, flowing flood water, not just rainwater, flowing flood water that got into play areas, you have on your consent agenda tonight contracts to remove that. What we have is fill in those areas for safety. That has to be removed and replaced because of concerns about the contamination. Most of those areas are roped off now or fenced off now, so the children can't play on it. So before the snow flies much, we hope to get all of that out, get the new play surface back in so the children can use that. So that contract's on your consent agenda for tonight. We continue to work with insurance and FEMA on the claims around this. We are well past $5 million now, and still trying to document all that went on in our related expenses, and some of those expenses continue as we're doing special transportation routes or maybe temporary housing for students. And so Leslie Stafford, Chief Financial Officer, is taking lead on that, working with claims around flood insurance, our insurance pool, and then FEMA is the other. And then those things don't get covered by any of those. We'll look to our community, and they've been very generous in supporting us with direct or indirect resources, which we appreciate, and clearly Ball Corporation making a sizable donation to our community, including impact on education that will be helpful to our students and families in their recovery. So we went through student count last week, and amazingly, Crestview opened on Monday and student count was on Tuesday. And Principal Ned says, I think we should do count today. We've got almost everybody here. And so we've been working with CDE to create as much flexibility as we can because we can account for all of our students. They might not physically be in our buildings because they're still stranded in the mountains, or they might come down a couple of days a week, then go back up just because transportation is so difficult, or we're working with them online. So overall, that's going okay. It's not great. It's not the same as having them with us, so we're anxious to get all the students in every day. But again, that's part of that attendance piece of enrollment count that we'll work with the Department of Ed. But so far, they've been working cooperatively with us because there are other districts like our own that are impacted. I will just say that as I was at the state superintendent's meeting last week in Colorado Springs and had a chance to talk to my colleagues who were in other impacted counties and districts, and I think everybody was impacted in different ways, but as far as physical structures damaged, owned by the school district, clearly Boulder Valley took probably the biggest hit on that just for maybe obvious reasons, but we were, as far as damage, which I'm sure the insurance pool is pleased about, as we belong there with other districts as well. So anyway, that's kind of my flood update. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Real quickly, yesterday we started our first strategic planning oversight committee meeting. Over 20 representatives from parents, staff, different employee groups, community. Some of the same faces that helped us with our work on the goals through the course of last year volunteered to work on this committee, and so Deirdre is facilitating that group, and so we had a really productive day together yesterday, and we've scheduled ourselves to meet for day-long meetings, one a month through the course of this year, and we'll give you a more formal update on that yet this fall. But I just wanted to let you know that the flood delayed it just a little bit, but we have them going and got waded into the goals, provided them an update so they better understood how we got to where we are with your approval of the goals last spring. The other thing I want to mention briefly, Jim and Deirdre and I were at a meeting last week at Mapleton Early Childhood Center with a quarterly meeting with CU, City, and County. And probably to no one's surprise, a fair amount of our conversation related around the impact of the flood. But once we got past that, we also talked about issues around the legislature and the federal government that impact all of our agencies. So that's always a good meeting, productive conversations, and help us maintain our relationships with our colleagues in the community. Next Tuesday, the 15th, a week from today, we have scheduled a review of the legislative platform. You asked earlier in the year that Briggs would, under Briggs's leadership, our governmental relations director, that we would do a refresh on that platform. So those of you that have been helping with that and have seen it, I think Jenny and Laura, you've had a chance to give input, and several of us have. So we'll bring that to you in a work session next Tuesday, trying to get it out earlier than we have in previous years, and maybe scheduling time with legislators earlier than we have in previous years as well. And then just to remind you, the board planning retreat is on Monday the 4th, and I think that some of you have signed up online, and others need to do that yet. So if you would, that you will all be together on the 4th, but Jane Urschel, our facilitator, would like to visit with you like she does each time. So she would like to have you schedule a time to visit with her. And then I also want to mention at your place I laid a copy of the Strategic Planning Steering Committee or Oversight Committee, so you give a sense. Most of those names you'll recognize. Folks who are representing our employees, our community, parents, and DAC also has a representative. So, Jim, I think that concludes my report. It was kind of lengthy. I'd be glad to answer any questions the board might have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Messenger. Any questions, or we'll hold them till our comment? All right, well, thank you, Dr. Messenger. We'll go next to our public hearing and public participation, which tonight we don't have anyone signed up, which means we can go right into board communication. So if any board members do have some follow-up with Dr. Messenger, I like how you've been keeping the board informed about the total costs as they're going up. I don't know when we're going to know about insurance claims. Is it going to take a while before we kind of understand how far into reserves we're going to be with this event?
Yeah, I think it will be a while. I'll say a couple of things, and I would ask Leslie maybe to add. So, this isn't probably unlike any of you that have done this in your own homes, is that you work through, so first was our flood insurance, and then our pool, and then we understand that there are some things FEMA will pay for, but whatever they do pay for will be at a 75% level. So some of this is working through the process. But Leslie, if you'd comment, please. I know you've been working closely.
Sure. So we submitted an RFP for a Fema consultant. We're considering hiring someone to help us through this process of negotiating between the flood insurance and the pool insurance and FEMA. And so we're going to be reviewing those tomorrow and hope to select somebody by early next week. And then we actually have a FEMA meeting scheduled for October 22nd is when our kickoff meeting is. And so at that point, and as we work with the pool, I think we'll have a better idea. My understanding in working with FEMA is it can take a long time. But in working with our pool, normally they're pretty good about getting us reimbursement quickly. So I would expect in the next couple of months we'll get a good idea as to how much the district will be out of pocket, and then how much we can then pursue with FEMA, other grant opportunities. I've been working with B to see if maybe we know there's money available through Project Serve, and we're meeting with CDE on Friday. I think they've secured $750,000 for districts to apply for, and that deadline is November 12th, so we'll also be looking to get some recovery of funds there.
Sorry, I jumped right in, but Leslie.
I remember asking Chris King is there a point when Tabor can ever be used? And he said, well, maybe under catastrophic flood conditions. So I'm wondering if we do dig into reserves, can we dig into Tabor, or would it have to be our other reserves?
Our understanding is that we can use Tabor, but we have to replenish Tabor.
Okay.
So it's like loaning ourselves an advance on money. Is that close,
Right.
Leslie?
So we have a 3% contingency reserve that we could dip into in addition to our 3% Tabor reserve, which we could probably use. I don't expect us to have to dip in that far into the Tabor, and both of those do have to be refilled at some point. But, you know, if it takes us longer than expected to get reimbursement, at least we do have those reserves sitting there if we need to tap into it for cash flow purposes.
Well, it's nice having that cushion. Well, and I just wanted to mention that I spent part of the day on Sunday at Crestview, and I know Jenny was there on Saturday, and oh gosh, it was just so amazing to see everyone working so hard. And I was actually very impressed with the ServPro folks, because I can't tell you how many times they came in and said what needs cleaning, what needs moving, you know, how can we help. I know Home Depot was there with their crew for temporary shelving and so forth. So, you know, and the staff, I think they were tired, but, you know, really looking forward to having the kids back in. And I actually left my sunglasses in one of the kindergarten classrooms. So on Tuesday I went in, and it was just so fun to see the kids. You know, they looked like, you know, they were active, and like nothing different was with the room, even though there were, you know, mismatched rugs taped all over the place. But it was, you know, I just really want to thank everyone that worked so hard on getting that together. And speaking of Mapletown, I would like to go over there sometime and visit when, you know, the kids are there. So how do I arrange that? Who should I?
Sandy, know that we'll work with Ashley and Kim and make arrangements.
Okay, because that'd be fun
Avoid nap time.
to get in there. Yeah.
It's quiet.
No, early morning when they're most active.
Be glad to. It's really fun to see when the children are there.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Any other board comments, questions? Sam?
I'll just echo Leslie's thanks to everybody who got the kids back to Crestview on time. That was great. I just had a nice visit to Whittier today with Sandy and Sandy Ripplinger and Becky Escamilla, and learned a lot about how you apply that IB approach at the elementary level and the cross-disciplinary work they do with the kids there in a school that I believe they said has kids from 24 different countries. And there's a lot going on at Whittier. There's not very much space, pretty much full to the gills, and I was concerned that there were 31 kids in the 4th grade class, but overall very positive impression of everything they're doing at Whittier. I think that's it.
Thank you, Sam. Jenny?
So, we had a work session with DAC, which was really great. I think DAC is, oh, it's a little lights on. Okay, so anyway, thank you. Which is a wonderful committee that I encourage people to try to get on. We just have great parent representation on that committee. But I wanted to follow up on a remark you made that wasn't really germane to the conversation, so I didn't ask then. No, I don't mean, never mind. Anyway, but you were talking about data collection by the state and concerns that DAC had raised about state proposals for data collection. And since earlier this week you also sent us an article about data collection, I thought maybe you could expand on that a little bit, please.
So the article that I shared with you is from the New York Times around a program called In Bloom, which is being piloted at Jefferson County Schools in partnership with the Colorado Department of Education and being funded by the Gates Family Foundation. So that was that reference point, and it has created some discussion within their community about data management, data storage, data retrieval, data security. So that's that. This other reference was with regard to what's called a data pipeline. It is a conduit of data that CDE is collecting on multiple sources that will allow a more centralized data collection and then analysis. And so in previous days, before folks had electronic student information systems or had even the ability to do that locally, this district being one of not even able to collect it locally from building to building, obviously we are more sophisticated in that ability now. as many districts are. Probably not all districts still in our state have effective student management systems. But then what of that data should go to the Colorado Department of Education? I mean, again, what is their need to have that data? I mean, if they can retrieve it electronically, seamlessly, and it's data that we would send to them anyway because they need it for state reports or funding or whatever reasons, then obviously there's some benefit to this idea of just pulling the data from the districts and trying to do that with less time, effort, energy on our part. So there's some positive sides to that. I think some of the discussion that came up in DAC was around student behavior. So we keep management records of our students' behavior, so discipline or other information that we find valuable as we work with parents or within the school community. So there's also state reporting that we provide on gross data, how many students were suspended, in school, out of school, those kinds of reports. So they have a sense over time, not just what we look at that data a lot, obviously, but the state has interest in that as well. So then the question, really, the discussion at DAC was what level of specificity should be attached to that data. So group data is one thing, individual data is another, and then how precise does that need to be? What's the need to know that? And then how is that data used? And I think some of what Jonathan Dings and Michelle DeBerry shared that evening at DAC is that there's requests for data that exceeds what's required, we believe, by statute. And so there's that kind of gray area between, well, what is the need to know? What's the value of that to anyone? And what are the potential risks associated with collecting that data? I mean, we work hard to secure that data locally, obviously, and we don't provide data even internally unless we think there's a need to know. So we don't hide information about students from staff who need to know that, but we don't just abundantly share it either if it isn't something that's relevant to their work with students. So I think it's that tension that we discussed in DAC about how much needs to flow and at what point would we say we're not going to share that data because we don't think there's a requirement. The other agency who plays in this at times is the Office of Civil Rights, because they also look for patterns of discrimination or bias in how we enroll students in advanced courses or discipline students of color or economic status. So there, again, there's some positive analysis of this that's helpful both locally and at the state level. But that was really the discussion with DAC, and Tom and Shelley were both there. They might want to add to that, and I know Jonathan is in the audience. He too might have additional information. But that's kind of was the source of that, my comment earlier this evening, Jenny. So.
Well, I would be interested if Tom and Shelley had anything to add,
Yeah.
because I share some concerns about how much data or how much specific data needs to be shared, especially about kids.
All right, thanks, Shelley.
Well, I could add from DAC's meeting that I was quite surprised how almost universally everyone was opposed to this kind of data sharing at the meeting. I mean, I don't think anyone there promoted that, any of the parents that were there. So I think everyone's on the same page. So it's so far. And I just, I'd like to understand on this issue of privacy, how in a given situation that might work. Like earlier this year, I think I wrote to you and told you about someone who had contacted me and said their daughter had been in trouble. She went away for a year. She was coming back and she was looking for a different school so she could develop new friends and get a fresh start. So would she be able to do that under this new data requirement? Because she's doing quite well in her new school, and no one knows that she had difficulty in her other school, and that's been part of the reason she's been successful.
So I don't know that we know the answer from the state perspective on that, because obviously we've expressed some concern just about collecting the data. And then I think the subsequent conversation is collection is one thing, use of it's another. And so, I don't think we've, any indications come to us that the department would push that back out. So data for analysis purposes. I will tell you, when we do intake for student registration, we do have a process we go through. I'll just make it sound simple. Is the student in good standing? So it's one thing if it's from school to school within our own district. If it's a student that comes in, if we have any concerns about a student who could be create a safety issue or risk for students, we do an intake for them. Now, sometimes we have students who have had trouble in other districts, and we take them anyway because we think a fresh start is and we can provide the right supports. But that's kept in a pretty small circle of folks who would get that. I mean, really the issue is, will we be safe if they enter our schools as students, and will they be safe in our schools? And if the decision is that we can accept them, because there could be criminal issues or whatever, and so we do that analysis. Then it gets to that need to know question, is that if we have data on a student about previous and we don't think their past conduct is going to create a safety issue or a concern in our setting, then that's one of the filters we have to go through, is what does the classroom teacher need to know, what do the counselors need to know. So I mean, again, I think we're pretty conservative about that. I mean, what we don't want to do is bias a student's chances of not being successful or being successful. So but that's really more between the sending district and our district that we do that analysis, and that's child specific that we request that data. And 9 times out of 10 there isn't anything there that causes us concerns, or maybe 99 out of 100 there isn't. But on occasion, we just want to make sure we have accurate data. But that right now is not coming out of a state system. That's really between the 2 districts.
But once the state had that data, we have no idea what.
Well, I think that's another question down the line that's a further engagement we need to have about what protections students have around that.
So, let's see. Oh, I just want to make a comment about the legislative platform. I'm glad we're having a work session early, and I just want to make sure that every board member will have that before.
We're reviewing it at Cabinet tomorrow, Jenny, to kind of put our last touches on it.
Because we don't always have a lot of information before work sessions.
So we'll
but
push
that
that
will
out, right? It'll be a part of your agenda.
Okay, okay, great. And then just a question, I guess. So State Representative Diane Primavera had one of her town halls this weekend, and it was Karen McAvoy, who's with the Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children, came in and talked about concussions and how they're handled. And I thought, and she said that she said she didn't know what we did in Boulder Valley, that we had a bunch of their pamphlets on how to deal with it, but they'd never presented here. And so I thought I would ask. So what are we doing to train our coaches and educators about recognition of symptoms of childhood concussion, and then working with students who've been injured to make sure they recover safely before engaging in.
So that's probably a report. But what I will say is I've had some of the same conversations, and so the individuals who provided that information to me were Susan Rowley, our Director for Health Services, and also Michelle DeBerry in her role as Director of Athletics. And so work is being done. If you would like a more detailed description of that work, I would probably an RFI would be appropriate.
Okay.
Because I mean, so I asked the same question a year ago. So I know that there's information available, and we could certainly pull it together if that's something.
Right, and I would be really interested, because I think the protocol has really changed.
Yeah,
and
and the group you mentioned is a really good resource as well.
Yeah. So so I recommend checking their website out if anybody has any questions. She was great, and it is an important issue. Yes. And then, can I ask one final question, please? Oh,
Leslie
yeah.
wants to build on.
Well, I just, I don't know, again, if it's just school specific, but I know certainly my child athletes at Boulder High and the parents had to sign off on a concussion information form about a program and so forth. So they were making parents and athletes quite aware of
Well, that's good.
the issue.
That's good.
And I don't know if it was from this group or not, but
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but yeah, so district-wide, we've been doing some of that
yeah.
work.
So that wouldn't be the only group that could do it. I was just curious how the community representatives were chosen for the strategic planning committee. I missed that piece somehow.
So for the most part, we reached out to several of these individuals because of their prior involvement or their interest in other district activities. So internally, we did an application process for our own employees, and then the executive committee of the steering committee reviewed all those applications, and we had more interest than we had. We just didn't want the committee to get too big. So we went through and we wanted to be sure we had, representation. So that was internally. From the community, these are folks that we reached out to, and not everyone we asked was able to because of, it's a big commitment of time. So, but they did not have to go through an application process. So we didn't advertise to the community. That were, I guess, recruited would be a better way to describe it. Internally, an application; externally, by invitation.
So do you feel that different student groups, say at-risk, special ed, and TAG, are well represented on this committee?
We do. But
Kind of a loaded question. When did
yeah,
you stop
no.
beating your wife? Yes, okay, yes.
I mean, so maybe I could answer more broadly, is that so we really had several filters we ran this through, and so representing different levels, different areas of our communities, and some we weren't successful in, so we haven't given up in a couple areas. So geographic areas, different groups, and so a group might be represented by a parent or community member, or it might be represented by a staff member. And so, but we do think, but that's probably not perfect. And I think we owe it to ourselves as we get into the work around the strategies and action teams and steps. Clearly, then, so this will be part of the report later. But I would just say, this isn't the group that will develop the specific action steps and strategies. This group really, by design, will provide oversight. And then there will be working groups, so if it's in the area of graduation or at risk or literacy or GT, then there will be separate groups that work on that. This we've assured them they didn't have to do the whole thing. So whatever more in-depth representation we need in areas, then that group that will work, and again, some of that will be, many of those folks may well be staff, but then we can give us a chance to reach out to community as well. So I think between the two strategies, we think we'll have adequate representation. But we're early in the process, but that was our intent. So we did think we covered the waterfront pretty well between staff and community.
Thanks, Jenny. Lori?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to say that last week I had the opportunity to go to Arapahoe Ridge and observe 400 children, 4th and 5th graders, I think. There were 4th and 5th graders who were studying Colorado history, and they were talking about food and food production in animals, and it was an absolutely terrific hands-on program at Arapahoe Ridge, coordinated by the county, I think, and some of our teachers as well. I mean, we had a lot of teachers who were there, and they were talking to children about soil and water and planting and harvesting, and they had some chickens, and the kids planted a few seeds and took them home, and it was just a great hands-on experience, and it was a beautiful day. They told me that last year it was really, really cold, and so this week it was absolutely beautiful. But it was a wonderful, I thought, collaboration between teachers and the county and some volunteers who, I'm not sure what exactly organization they're with, sorry, but it was a not-for-profit group that helps kids think about how food is produced. It was just great. It was just really fun. 400 kids out there in the parking lot. It was great. Anyway, and that's it. Thanks. Oh, I guess I would say one more thing. The CASB Delegate Assembly is this week, and I have a booklet here if anybody would like to review it and see what's being suggested. If you'd like me to vote differently, I'd be happy to take your input. I was thinking, and do what you say.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not just taking input, but but it seems to me as we're working, as we're talking about the legislative agenda and platform that we have, that's really the place where it's BVSD's work. And that's really direct to what we want in our district and what we want our legislators and our delegation to understand. So I think that's a place to probably have a little bit more input than in what the 170 districts want CASB to do. So, but I do have it here, and if anybody would like to borrow it, you're welcome. I think there's an electronic copy somewhere, although I haven't seen it. Have you seen it, electronic? Okay. Anybody wants to see it, let me know. That's it. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank all the board members. It seems like we may want to stay on top of this data collection piece,
Yeah.
and that I don't know if we have anything in our platform, but maybe our legislative
Yeah, that's a good
liaisons
point.
can be prepared to discuss that at our next meeting. So that can end board communication. Our next item is our action items consent grouping, which tonight consists of personnel items, the approval of minutes September 24th, 2013 regular meeting, acceptance of donation Bear Creek Elementary, acceptance of donation Douglas Elementary, award of construction contract for BVSD playground renovation, flood cleanup, and intergovernmental service agreement BVSD and Boulder County Public Health. I need a motion. Lori, seconded by Jenny. Does anyone have any motion, any item they'd like to pull? Does anybody have comments or questions on any items? If not, Sandy, we call the vote.
Albright?
Yes.
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford? Yes. Fuqua?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Sandy. So our last item is agenda setting. This week we have agenda setting on Thursday. So I've received some feedback from board members. So there's a document we keep of the future board meetings, planning wise, knowing that some things move around, especially the further you get out, things tend to move. But the request was to reshare that document. So I'll take that to the committee and see what we can do there. I heard Jenny's RFI earlier. Were there any other items from folks? All right.
I've got a question. So you're thinking about scheduling that as I'd like to have it as a study item, but you're thinking about scheduling that as an agenda item as opposed to.
Well, I think the RFI on the concussions first. Are we talking about different things? And see what information is there, and then figure out what our next step would be.
Okay.
Because there may be something we need to do, or that may satisfy our curiosity. So, if that makes sense. All right. Well, with that, we can stand adjourned. Thank you.